I recall hearing a story from the old days of traveling circuses when Ringling Brothers and P.T. Barnum were famous for having the greatest show on earth. The circus, with its animals and performers and equipment, would travel from town to town by train. They'd work to put up their big top tent with bleachers inside, and then to drum up interest and to boost ticket sales, they'd have a circus parade, usually down the main street of the town, with the elephants and caged lions and tigers, the clowns and performers on stilts, the jugglers and the acrobats, all heading toward the spot where the tents and attractions were set up. In those days, it was a spectacle the likes of which few people had ever seen. A boy asked his mother if he could have money to go see the circus. She said yes and gave him the money, and he set off. He headed down toward the center of town just as the circus parade was happening. He watched in amazement as the animals and performers went by. And then, as the last of the parade came to where he was, he held out his money to one of the performers, who took it from him, and the boy happily headed home. Only when he got home and told his mother about what he'd seen did he learn that he hadn't actually seen the circus at all. He'd only been a spectator at the circus parade, which was a mere taste of what the circus really was. Hello, I'm Kevin Tully, and welcome to week 3 of How to Get Out of Lent. I thought of that story I just related because sometimes our experience of the Lenten season can be like that. The experiences of doing good and taking on spiritual disciplines, of fasting, of improving or increasing our time spent in prayer, doing acts of kindness and mercy, they are all good things, but they are not ends in themselves. They are all meant to open us to something bigger and deeper, an experience of the inner world of the Spirit. In one way or another, they give us a taste of what is needed to become and continue as a disciple of Christ. They signal to us what can happen when we give ourselves over to God's control. Let's take fasting, for example. A person may fast, skipping a meal they usually eat, or, as the Muslims do during Ramadan, doing without food during the daylight hours and only eating in the evening. In doing so, we experience a little of what it's like to experience true hunger, which can and ought to make us more sensitive to the needs of those for whom hunger is a regular experience. That's good. Or, during Lent, we may give up some luxury or pastime, maybe use the money we would have spent and direct it to a more noble purpose, giving it to charity or to someone in need. That, too, is good. But the deeper experience that fasting can awaken in us is the experience of subjugating our physical desires to spiritual ones. And that opens to us a whole new world of what it means to be God's person. Jesus said, "The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." You know, in a way, that's our main problem as God's people. And not just in terms of physical hungers and desires, it's this wrestling between the will of God and what we would rather do. It's the struggle between what we want to say and how God may not want us to say it. Or the opposite, our experience of not wanting to do or say something and God wanting us to do it. The disciplines of Lent are meant to awaken in us an interest in experiencing more. The way the circus parade was meant to entice people to come and experience the real thing. Here are a couple of questions I invite you to consider in the coming days. First, where is the wrestling happening between you and God? Most of us know the answer to that question. What is the thing that seems to keep winning and keeping you from what you sense God wants you to do? Chances are it's a hunger of some sort, whether physical or emotional or financial, or maybe a wrestling between what you've heard and been taught and what new thing God is seeking to show and teach you. It could be a wrestling between habits we've developed and new ways of living that God would like us to learn. Like some of the food we eat, it's not really needed. It's just habit that we do these things. Like needing to point out others' faults, or needing to win every argument, or an addiction to showing off or bragging, an addiction to laziness or procrastination. Our experience of letting God have his way with us during the season of Lent may just be the beginning point of letting God have his way in some of these other areas as well. If we can give up something as basic and as habitual as food, that shows us we could choose to give up some other things as well. So, question 1. Where is the wrestling between you and God happening? The second question is this. What small victory can you claim that might entice you to experience more of giving yourself over to God's control? Hey, if you're able to skip a meal or do without a favorite food, do you think you might also be able to keep from saying a hurtful word? Refrain from engaging in gossip? If you're able to carve out time for a daily devotional during Lent, doesn't that sort of prove that you could find the time to do some other important things, the kind that so often get set aside in our busy ways of living? Could you make that phone call to reconnect with someone? Could you choose to get involved with a group or a ministry that does you and the world some lasting good? So, question number 2, what small victory can you claim during Lent? And what do you think it implies about other future victories? Finally, may I encourage you to keep a few notes about what's going on with you during Lent? Now, some people are diligent and eloquent journalists, and others are not. I'd like to encourage you to at least keep a few notes about what you're learning and experiencing. And if you're able to take on something or give up something, if you're able to give yourself over to God's control in some new or deeper way, please write that down. That's record of a fact that you don't want to forget or dismiss. You've seen what can happen. With God's help and the Spirit's guidance, it can be done. And that knowledge, that proof written on paper, may just be the encouragement we need to let the lessons of Lent continue to take hold in our lives and our living. I'll see you next week.